Okay, everybody, David Fogel here, back with you, CEO of the Symphonina Foundation. We got another podcast for you, and I'm very happy to be joined today by Eric Holtan. Eric is the founding director of the True Concord Voices Orchestra in Tucson, Arizona, and also Grammy nominated this year for A Dream So Bright, choral music of Jake Rubinstein. Eric, how you doing today?
Really great, David. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Well, it's our pleasure, and we're both in the same kind of area. But of course, for choral music, as I wrote in a review of Patty Drennan's work, when you listen to things that are really well done in choral music, it's not right to say that there's a best instrument in the world because every instrument is beautiful in its own way. A timpani roll is beautiful. A saxophone, like you see behind me, can be beautiful. A piano is beautiful. A harp is beautiful. And so is a human voice. And I said, basically it's first among equals when it's because it's the music I would say, let me listen to that. And so I really appreciate all the things that you do. Let's talk about where you got started first before we get into choral music, because I think you started like it's a church organist when you were a little kid, if I understand right.
Well, that's true. I grew up in a musical household. I was really blessed to grow up with both sets of grandparents in a small little town in western Minnesota. My grandma on my dad's side was a pianist, although she couldn't read a lick of music, but she could play any song that you asked her to play. But from the 30s or the 40s, going back even further than that. My grandpa on my mother's side had his own dance band. He played the saxophone, played the tenor, and he used to tour around West Central Minnesota with his three-piece band, playing all those hits again from the 30s and the 40s and such. So I grew up in that house, and every birthday party, every anniversary, every celebration inevitably turned into a song fest. And my dad played the clarinet. We had a small organ in our house along with a piano. So my grandma's sister would play the organ, and the rest of us would sing. And so I just grew up immersed in music. And then I started taking piano lessons in first grade, and those first few years were rough. It was, if I had the opportunity to quit, I would have. But thanks to my mom, who was insistent, and she sat with me every night to practice 30 minutes a day. And bless her for doing that. And it wasn't until about sixth grade that she finally could stop, because something clicked, and it was like, actually, I kind of enjoy this. And having grown up in the church, I became fascinated with, what we like to call as the king of instruments. And not only was I just impressed with and amazed by the range of sounds that the organ was capable of deploying, but there was something about its power to inspire and lead collective singing. And that really fueled my interest in singing. So I played the tenor sax in band after following my grandpa's footsteps. We didn't have an orchestra, so I played in the band and played the tenor sax, and studied piano. But I gravitated towards organ by about sixth grade, studying organ. But I was also singing in choirs, and that collective experience of singing with others, whether it was in church or it was in school choir, was really impactful for me. And so, when I started playing the organ in church, small town, so not many organists, and I was playing in both the Catholic church and the Lutheran church, which is pretty much all we had in this small little town. And that was really it had a impact on me in terms of formulating my approach to go to college, because what I thought I was going to do when I went to college was I was gonna study business and music both, and I was going to make my money in the business world somehow, but I was going to continue my work as a church musician, sort of on the side. Well, then a few things happened. Number one, I had to take macroeconomics and pre-calc,
Yep.
which were, let's say, less than stellar experiences for me. But I also made the top choir at this little college I went to in Minnesota, and had just a transformative experience with the conductor of that choir and that choral experience. And I thought, you know what, this is what I want to do. I want to lead others in singing, and singing at a high quality. He was very insistent about the quality, and he used to have a saying, "There's no room for mediocrity in the arts," and that has been a philosophy that has um, carried me all the way through my studies. So, growing up in that musical household, going to college and having that choral experience. I After that freshman year, I dropped my business major. I went all in on music, and have been studying and working in choral music particularly ever since.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story. It not only did you do that, you also did it like as a college major. You also did it your master's and your doctorate in music arts too. So before we go on to what you're doing now and the current projects and so forth, like what is the educational experience for somebody who's getting a graduate degree or two in music or music related areas?
Well, first of all, I have to admit that I wasn't the best student in undergraduate school, and it's because I came out of high school and school came pretty easy for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself in my undergraduate years. I mean, I worked hard. I could have worked harder, but I got the bug to really want to go as far as I could with the conducting. In the conducting profession. And I realized that required more graduate study. And so I really got serious when I did my master's. I went to the University of Iowa. I got a master's in choral conducting. I remember going and taking the entrance test at the University of Iowa. If everybody goes to grad school, they're gonna quiz you to see what you know, and then they're gonna determine what classes you need to take. I had to take every class. I showed up, and definitely I didn't have a depth of knowledge in music in general, that I had to take all of the theory, all of the history, and I did, and I learned a ton. I was a better, more serious, more mature student, so I took my classes more seriously than I did in undergraduate school. Learned just a ton, earned the degree, went on to do my doctorate in at the University of Arizona in conducting. Same thing, take the entrance exams, except I pass everything
There you go.
because I've learned so much in my master's degree. So now I was more selective. I was able to be more selective in the courses that I took in my doctoral degree. And the beauty of the program at the University of Arizona was that I could get a major and a minor. And I decided to major in choral conducting and do a minor in orchestral conducting, because as part of that Iowa experience, that master's experience, this kind of goes back to my point about not knowing a whole lot about music. I'll even go back a little further. So I went to this small Lutheran liberal arts college, Gustavus Adolphus College in Minnesota. Wonderful choral tradition, but a very narrow tradition. We did, short a cappella Christian texted pieces, and it was wonderful. I loved it. And then I get to the University of Iowa, and they're quizzing me on all the masterworks, and I don't know anything about them.
Right.
And one of the first works that we performed at the University of Iowa was Mendelssohn's Elijah. And I was just knocked out by this piece. I was like, I didn't realize they wrote music like this. In terms of the sophistication of the writing, the marriage of the orchestra and the chorus in this full length concert, full length oratorio just blew me away. So that opened my mind and some doors of new thinking about music and all the possibilities thereof. And so when I came to the University of Arizona and saw that I could combine choral and orchestral conducting, and realizing that for me, while I grew up in this singing tradition of mostly a cappella choral music, bringing voices and instruments together was like, in my mind, the epitome of music making. It was like you've got the best of both worlds colliding in this wonderful combination of just ecstasy. So I followed that at the University of Arizona in my course selection and in my training as a conductor. I ultimately did. So, as part of the doctoral program, it's not a PhD. So I wasn't required to do extensive original research, but you're still required to do research on a topic. And I chose Mendelssohn, again, going back to that really light bulb moment I had back in my master's degree. And my topic was the use by Mendelssohn of the chorale form in both his symphonies and oratorios. He's got Elijah and St. Paul as his two finished oratorios. He had an unfinished oratorio, Christus. And then he's got these two symphonies, the Reformation Symphony and the Lobgesang, which incorporate chorale tunes in them.
Let me ask, what was the motivation for you continuing on beyond the master's to get the doctorate? Because a lot of people in the music world who go for the educational upper degree, graduate degree, stop at a master's degree and move on, whether it's in performance or whatever it might be. But what was your motivation for continuing on to do doctor work?
Well, so my motivation was twofold. One, I wanted to learn more. I had just an incredible experience at doing the master's degree. Just learned so much, and my excitement was growing. Um, and so I knew I wanted to continue learning. I was also on a track because I thought that what I ultimately wanted to do was go back and be the conductor of the Gustavus Choir. Like that to me was like, the was the epitome of the ultimate job I could have. Although, again, as I said, that Gustavus and those schools like that were narrowly focused on music that was mostly a cappella. And so, regardless, I was thinking I wanted to be a college professor. I wanted to lead a college music program. And right after my master's degree, I was invited actually to do a 1 year fill in at a university in Minnesota, St. Cloud State University. And I went in there to lead the choral program. It was a fascinating experience. I felt like I earned another master's degree because I learned a lot doing it. One of the things I learned is that maybe college teaching wasn't the ultimate, that there were definite limitations. I was turned off by the politics of in academia and some of the musical restrictions. But I went and did my doctorate thinking, maybe I'll still think about being a college professor someday. But as I got deeper into this doctorate and realized that I really wanted to work with the combined forces of voices and instruments, I knew that college teaching wasn't going to be the ultimate, the optimal choice for that. And so, as I was finishing my degree at the University of Arizona, I was contemplating how I could launch my own professional chamber choir and orchestra. And the University of Arizona is situated here in Tucson, Arizona. And I was taking stock of the fact that Tucson has a professional symphony orchestra, a professional opera company, a professional theater company, a professional ballet company, but it did not have a professional chamber choir and orchestra. And I thought maybe there's a niche here that could be filled, a void. And so I thought, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I asked all my music school pals. I said, you know what? I'm gonna do this project. We're gonna give two concerts. We're gonna have four rehearsals, and I'll pay you $100. Now this is 2004, and these grad student friends of mine were like, yeah, $100. That sounds great. So we did the rehearsals. We did the performances. I counted up all the money, and I could only pay them $50.
Yeah.
And but as I've said many times, we've been paying them more ever since. That was the humble beginnings of what is now True Concord Voices and Orchestra. I like to say that some people start companies and organizations in their dorm rooms or in their basements. I started True Concord in the music library at the University of Arizona in a carrel as I was completing my final research paper, looking out the window, contemplating my next move.
Yeah. What year was that again, Eric?
2004.
And here we are, 20 years later, 21 years later.
Here we are. It's been quite a journey, and it's been so rewarding in many ways, challenging, of course. I mean, during that time of growing this organization, we faced the Great Recession, we faced COVID, but this community of Tucson really did respond to this idea of a professional chamber choir and orchestra enthusiastically and generously, and has supported us to this exciting point that we're 21 years in.
That's great. When you were talking about academic politics, I'm heartened to know that that's true in music departments too. It's also true in engineering departments. It's true in all the departments. And I'm reminded of a line that Henry Kissinger said once, which is, in academia, the fights are so vicious because the stakes are so low. So everybody kills each other over nothing. But anyway, I'm glad you mainly escaped that. That sounds good. So, all right, let's let you're Grammy nominated this year, and congratulations on that. It's quite an honor, of course, for A Dream So Bright, choral music of Jake Runestad. Let's talk a little bit about your involvement in that and what you achieved.
Well, thank you. I should back up and say that this is our second nomination. I'm thrilled that we've been to the Grammys twice. Our first came back in the 2015-2016 cycle with an album of music by composer Stephen Paulus, another Minnesota-based composer, by the way. Jake Runestad and Stephen Paulus, Minnesota-based. Stephen Paulus had a prolific career, particularly in choral music, and so I had commissioned him a couple of times, a shorter piece at first. And I remember thinking, when I reached out to him, this guy's so well known, yeah, I probably won't even hear back from him. I wrote him an email, and he wrote me right back. Would be thrilled to work with me. This is back in 2009. And we premiered a short piece of his. And then I had an idea that I wanted to write something significant to commemorate the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And I went back to Stephen, and he created Prayers and Remembrances, a 35-minute piece that was about healing and embracing that which we have in common, regardless of our differences, and the common thread that runs through all people, which is, and through most religions, which is love thy neighbor. And at that time, we were still pointing fingers in terms of who was responsible for 9/11 and blaming groups of people. And this piece was meant to heal, to bring people together and embrace that common idea of loving thy neighbor. And we premiered it on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and we ultimately recorded that piece, and that first piece that I commissioned of Stephen, along with some other previously unrecorded works of Stephen. We released it in 2015, on the same day that we made our Lincoln Center debut, performing his Prayers and Remembrances along with Mozart Requiem. It went to number 5 on Billboard and garnered 2 nominations, one for Best Choral Performance and one for Best Contemporary Classical Composition, which Stephen won. The sad part of the story is that 6 weeks after we recorded the album with Stephen in Tucson, he suffered a tragic stroke from which he never recovered, and to which he ultimately succumbed. And so he was awarded the Grammy posthumously. And one of the most touching moments in my life was watching his widow and his 2 sons accept the Grammy on his behalf in 2016.
Yeah.
Fast forward several years, another Minnesota-based composer, Jake Runestad, someone who's been a rising star, particularly in the choral music world. I went to him and asked him to write a piece. This time the topic was the climate crisis. And along with commissioning Jake, we commissioned a longtime collaborator of Jake, Todd Boss, who's a poet and a librettist. And he created a libretto for what is called Earth Symphony. It's a multi-movement work, 30-minute work. And the topic of the climate situation is addressed from the perspective of Mother Earth herself and the journey that she has been on since the birth of the universe and the planet, and particularly her relationship um, with humanity. She refers to humanity as her beloved, and mirabilia, which is a word that Todd came up with, a term of endearment, and her fondness for humanity and humanity's creativity and ingenuity, but then her disappointment and frustration, and ultimately her anger at our abuse of her. And it's a powerful work that really describes the journey that that Mother Earth has gone on, and it ends on a hopeful note of restoration and renewal. But of course, we may have to go through very difficult times, as we're seeing, right now and all over the world, as a result of climate change.
Yeah. So with a dream so bright, you went to the Grammys. What was your experience like at the Grammys this year?
The experience was wonderful. So, in addition to the Earth Symphony, the other work on the program or on the album I should mention real quickly is Dreams of the Fallen. This is a piece that Jake wrote a few years previous to Earth Symphony. It also is orchestra and choir, although it features a significant piano part. And Jeffrey Beagle was our pianist and fine musician who commissioned the work several years ago. That piece, it has as a text poetry by a veteran of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, Brian Turner, in which he describes his experience in armed combat and his experience following combat, and really detailing what many of our veterans have suffered from, that is PTSD. So, two powerful works, although both of them ending on a hopeful tone. In Dreams of the Fallen, it's the other side. What does the other side look like when a community embraces these heroes of ours who have served on our behalf, and assists them and helps them as much as we can to overcome their difficulties after coming out of those harrowing experiences. So we packaged that album, two pieces on the album. Thrilled that it debuted at #2 on Billboard, and that it garnered a Grammy nomination for Best Choral Performance. So it was really a great honor to return to the Grammys 9 years later, and be in the midst of just really esteemed colleagues within our category. We didn't win this year. The Crossing from Philadelphia won. Just an outstanding ensemble, focused primarily on new music, doing really great things on the East Coast. But one of the great aspects of the Grammys is being able to connect with this wonderful community, of which you're one, David. The many people that have had the opportunity to interact with, to share music with, to learn from, to be inspired by, to be lifted up by. It was just so gratifying to actually be in their presence and see them succeed. Several of my friends were nominated. Some of them won. That was really satisfying to me to be part of their joy and their success. And everybody is celebrating the power of music, and the music's power to bring people together, to lift people up, to bring beauty, hope, and joy and love at a time when we just so desperately need these things, with all the difficulties that we're facing, whether it's the climate or discord around the world or injustice and discrimination. The world needs music and its universal power to heal and bring people together. And that was on display in full force at both the premiere ceremony, where the bulk of the Grammys are awarded, and even in the much larger telecast ceremony.
Yeah, and of course also with the recent fires in Los Angeles, which, as I noted yesterday on a news thing, it 100% contained. Palisades and Eaton fires yesterday, which means they're still burning, but at least they're 100% contained. So it's easy to put it out of your mind and say, well, they must have gotten that under control a long time ago. But these issues persist, and many of us know people who lost their homes, or partly, or they're displaced or whatever. So all these things are going on at the same time. And yeah, I greatly appreciate what you're saying there about music having the power to bring us all together. So that's great. What are you working on for this year?
Well, thanks for asking. We're in the middle of our concert season. We've got an All-American program coming up here later this month. We're doing music of Copeland and Thompson, and we're giving the world premiere of a new suite edition of Mark Blitzstein's Airborne Symphony. We're celebrating the upcoming 250th anniversary of the founding of Tucson, which coincides with the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Davis Month and Air Force Base here in Tucson, which is a significant uh, organization here, and indelible made an indelible impact on this community. And so I wanted to perform a work that celebrated the miracle of flight. Um, this piece by Mark Blitzstein, it's a World War II era piece. We got authorization from the Kurt Weill Foundation to create a new suite, a shorter suite version of the piece that will eschew the references to war and conflict and even Hitler's name, and just focus on the aspects of flight and the miracle of flight itself as a way of celebrating Davis Monthan here in Tucson. So that's coming up at the end of this month. Next month, we close our season with a program. I mentioned we made our debut in New York City back in 2015 with Paulus's Prayers and Remembrances and Mozart's Requiem. And so that was 10 years ago. We're doing a reprise of that program to celebrate that moment in the history of our
Nice.
organization. So that's how we close the season. I'm very excited about an album that we're working on. We've recorded two pieces by another Minnesota-based composer, as it turns out, Jocelyn Hagan, also another real rock star in the choral music field. We commissioned her to write a piece to celebrate and commemorate the centenary of the passage of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which guaranteed women the right to vote. And what Jocelyn has done is she has quoted 46 different women. I mean, from Hildegard von Bingen to Oprah Winfrey, just across the gamut, these luminary women figures. And really, the topic is about the indelible impact that women have had on art and culture and in our society, and celebrating their voice and their contributions, and um, and 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 putting together in a collage, if you will, of excerpts of from their speeches and their writings that work through the entire piece. It's about a 30-minute piece. There's narration. There is musical setting of their words. It's an inspiring work that includes at the very end the Tucson Girls Chorus singing a short piece that really points to the future. So as we're celebrating the past and all that women have done for the betterment of the world, we look to the future for those future women who are going to make this world even better going forward. So that is one of the works on the album. The other work is a piece that we have performed that we were part of a consortium commission. It is her tribute. It's her notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci. Jocelyn studied Da Vinci's notebooks. She translated many of his writings and then set those writings to music. It's a celebration of creativity, of ingenuity, of genius, really.
Yeah.
And so these two works comprise our album by this wonderful composer, Jocelyn Hagan. We've recorded the works. We're in the editing process. We look forward to releasing it soon, I hope.
Great. Do you have a release date in mind?
We're working on that. We work with Reference Recordings out of San Francisco. We're thrilled to work with them. They've been a really great partner. So if we can't get it done in 2025, it's definitely going to be by 2026, which coincides with Reference Recordings' 50th anniversary, and of course America's 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So it seems fitting to have an album that celebrates women and their huge role in America in that anniversary year.
If people want to get in touch with you, Eric, what's the best way to do so?
Well, thanks again, David, for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. People can get in touch with me. You can go to www.trueconcord.org. No E on Concord. It's TRUECONCORD.org. You can look me up on Facebook, Eric Holtan, Holtan on Facebook. I love communicating with people through Facebook. I'm not on some of the other platforms, not because I have some bias against them. I'm just not very technologically savvy. And you can always email me at my first and last name at gmail.com. So ERICHOLTAN at gmail.com.
Eric, thanks so much for your time with us today.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it.